Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named Blind Spot Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The first story begins with a strange sound of a woman tossing and turning, unable to sleep at night without a man. She finally turned on the light and sat up on her bed to find the source of the noise. Upon closer listening, it was unmistakably the sound of a baby crying. Goosebumps rose all over her body to her butt, and a chill ran down her spine. The next day, the landlady contacted a paranormal investigator named Chen through some connections, explaining that she had bought a house to rent out, but all the tenants reported it was haunted. The woman, skeptical, moved in for a few nights herself, only to hear the crying sound as well. Hearing this, Chen assumed the sound must have been caused by an open window and the wind. As a staunch materialist, he refused to believe in ghosts, insisting that even if ghosts existed, they only existed in people's minds. In reality, his work as a paranormal investigator was solely to prove that there were no ghosts in the world. The woman who brought the landlady to Chen was his ex-girlfriend and former assistant. Chen commented that she had the potential to become the second-best paranormal investigator in the world, but instead, she had settled for a job at a real estate agency. Although he still owed her agency 3 months of rent, she didn't want to dwell on it. Instead, she pulled out an audio recording the landlady had made and handed it to Chen. To his surprise, upon hearing the recording, the normally skeptical Chen immediately tossed the recorder far away and agreed to visit the house the very next day. The house was a large property located in the mountains, with all its windows reinforced with security bars, presumably to keep out Spider-Man. Once inside, he set up advanced equipment and installed numerous surveillance cameras throughout the house. As evening approached, the landlady looked at the darkening sky and quickly excused herself, saying the house was particularly terrifying at night. Alone, Chen dozed off for a while until he was awakened by a message from a friend. While texting back, the power in the house suddenly cut out. Alarmed, Chen called the landlady, only for the landlady to ask if he had heard any strange sounds. That was when Chen sprang into action. As he set about locating the source of the sound, a small shadow flitted past him, but Chen was too busy to notice. He finally traced the sound to a bathroom door that refused to open. Just then, the power came back on, and everything returned to normal. The next day, the landlady unlocked the bathroom door, explaining that previous tenants had left in a hurry and stored some things inside, which she had locked up. Chen entered the bathroom and fixed his gaze on the toilet. At that moment, he received another message from his friend, saying he had sent Chen the floor plan of the house. After looking at the floor plan, Chen grinned and confidently told the landlady that the answer lay right there. That night, the landlady stayed with Chen. As darkness fell and the crying sound echoed through the house once again, Chen led the landlady to the bathroom. Pointing to the toilet, he announced that the sound was coming from there. He then guided the landlady to a nearby drainage well outside the house. When they opened the cover, they discovered a large number of catfish inside. Catfish are known for their strong survival instincts and are most active at night or during rainy weather, as they prefer darkness and humidity. The hotter the weather, the more active and ravenous they become. Coupled with the fact that the landlady's pipes were made of cast iron, a material that conducts sound exceptionally well, the baby-like cries had echoed through the house at night or during storms. However, a new question arose. Where did the catfish come from? The house had been rented to 3 different tenants. The first left after their lease expired normally, but the next 2 were frightened away by the eerie sounds. On the 3rd day, the landlady took Chen to meet the first tenant. That's when the mystery was solved. The tenant, while fooling around with her boyfriend, had accidentally flushed some catfish down the toilet. With the mystery resolved, Chen packed up to leave. But just as he turned to go, the unsettling sound of a baby crying echoed once more. Following the noise back to the bathroom, Chen froze as he witnessed blood gushing out of the toilet bowl. The horrifying scene left Chen shaken, but in the next moment, everything returned to normal. It was as if what he had seen had been nothing more than an illusion. When Chen arrived downstairs, he saw the same young woman again. She told Chen she had something important to say and made him promise not to tell anyone else. Before moving out, she had not only flushed a catfish into the pipes, but had also experienced a miscarriage in the house. That was the real truth. That night, as Chen prepared to record all of these events, he hesitated for a moment before ultimately deleting everything. But as soon as he turned away from the computer, the keyboard began typing by itself. On the screen, the same 2 words repeatedly appeared: Ghost Baby. The story ends here. The second story begins with a classmate who contacted Chen since his reputation as a paranormal investigator had spread. The classmate, who had become one of the earliest internet celebrities, was doing quite well and had purchased a building for his own company. However, strange occurrences involving the building's elevator had frightened many people. On the day Chen arrived, he encountered a woman who had fainted from fear. Seeing this, Chen immediately applied first aid, pressing on her philtrum until she regained consciousness. Once awake, she began shouting hysterically about seeing a ghost, a red-faced woman who could sing. Afterward, Chen went to the security room to check surveillance footage of the 5 recent incidents. To his surprise, every person who had experienced the ghost displayed the same terrified expression. However, the cameras hadn't captured anything else useful. Determined to uncover the truth, Chen installed additional surveillance cameras in the hallways and stairwells the following day. The incident reminded Chen of the infamous Elisa Lam case. Just as he was pondering this, he suddenly heard the eerie singing they had described. He quickly turned back to the monitors to check the footage, but there was nothing, no sign of anyone near the elevator. The next day, Chen reviewed the elevator maintenance records and located the repair technician. Chen told the technician about the singing voice that people had heard, but to his surprise, the technician laughed it off. He immediately followed Chen back to the elevator to investigate. When they reached the elevator shaft, the technician quickly pulled out his phone and dialed a number. A moment later, the familiar singing began again. Following the sound, he discovered an old flip phone with an incredibly long battery life. Smiling, the technician explained that during his last maintenance visit, he had lost the phone without realizing it. Now it made sense. The sound had been coming from the phone the whole time. Hearing this, Chen also laughed. After all, he had always believed that ghosts didn't exist in this world. Chen later recounted the entire incident to his classmate, who jokingly teased him, saying that being a paranormal investigator must be an easy way to make money. But just as Chen was about to leave via the elevator, the singing voice echoed once more. Like the previous 5 people, Chen then saw a red-faced woman hovering in the corner. Back home, Chen immediately started researching incidents involving a singer and soon discovered the horrifying truth. It turns out the singer had been strangled and her body dumped into an elevator shaft. The red face was caused by asphyxiation, which led to blood pooling in her face. The incident occurred at a building which had later been renamed and purchased by Chen's unlucky classmate. That night, Chen sat at his desk, writing up his investigation notes. Halfway through, he received a message from a friend. Despite the strange circumstances, Chen stubbornly dismissed it, muttering that seeing isn't always believing, as he deleted his notes. But as soon as he left the room, the keyboard began typing by itself again. On the computer screen, the same 3 words appeared repeatedly: red ghost face. The third story begins with a Tesla taxi driver parking his Tesla late at night under a desolate overpass. As the clock approached 11:58 p.m., the man fiddled with the radio, but no matter how much he tried, there was no sound. Frustrated, he banged on the device until finally at exactly midnight, a beautiful and melodious voice came through the speakers. Hearing it, the man relaxed, closing his eyes in contentment. The following day, a woman approached Chen with a flyer in her hand. She explained that her husband had been acting strangely of late. He would leave early, return home late, and fall straight to sleep like a pig. Worse still, he had stopped paying any attention to her and would mutter another woman's name in his sleep. At first, she thought her husband was having an affair, but she later discovered he had become obsessed with a late-night radio show called Lonely Heart, hosted by someone sexy. When she asked her husband's colleagues about it, they were shocked, telling her that the host had died years ago. Some said she had been murdered after offending the wrong people, while others claimed she had committed suicide. However, the woman didn't care about those details. She only knew her husband might have been haunted, so she came to Chen for help. Chen, a firm non-believer in ghosts, decided to investigate the matter. He first looked into the radio host. Online records revealed she had died in a car accident. That night, Chen followed the woman's husband to the overpass. As midnight approached, Chen also tuned into the frequency and picked up the same radio station, but something felt off. The content didn't quite match what the man had been hearing. Curious, Chen pulled out his professional equipment to analyze the signal. After a thorough investigation, Chen reached a conclusion. The man had been tuning in every night to an illegal adult radio station. The station used low-power FM signals covering a radius of only about half a mile. The strongest reception point was right where the man parked his car. Chen deduced that the station's operators were simply exploiting the host's tragic death to attract listeners. When the woman heard this, she was furious. She had spent days worrying her husband was possessed, only to find out he was trying to have some weird fun. However, a few days later, Chen came across a chilling news story. The same taxi driver had been killed in a car accident. Given the previous strange events, Chen felt the man's death was no coincidence. Determined to uncover the truth, he visited the scrapyard where the taxi had been sent. The manager told Chen that the driver had likely been drunk, as he had frequently visited that location late at night in an inebriated state. On one of those nights, the man had purchased an old radio, rumored to have belonged to the late host herself. Strangely, though the accident had destroyed the car beyond recognition, the radio had remained completely intact. Hearing this, Chen immediately bought the radio and returned to the same spot under the overpass at midnight. This time, the broadcast was completely different. Not only did he hear the host's sexy voice, but he also heard the taxi driver's. The host's chilling words rang through the static, saying she knew he was listening to this program. Soon, he would join them as a new host. He would be their partner, along with the Tesla driver. Before the final words had fully faded, Chen grabbed the radio and threw it into the river. He returned home and began writing his investigation notes. Halfway through, however, he deleted everything. But as soon as he turned away, the keyboard began typing on its own. On the screen, a chilling message repeated over and over, saying they were waiting for him. The fourth story begins with a man who ran a logistics company, but ever since his father passed away, his family had been receiving paper replicas of electronic goods. Feeling this was ominous, the man called the paranormal investigator Chen for help. Chen explained that paper offerings had been around for over 1,500 years. Superstitious people used them to honor the dead, but he personally believed it was just a form of emotional comfort. Nevertheless, he went home with his friend that night to look into the matter. The man sent his wife and child out of the room and showed Chen 2 drawings his daughter had made. One said she missed her grandpa and wanted an iPad and an iPhone, with a picture of a minion giving a gift to a little red figure. The couple suspected the drawings were somehow connected to the paper replicas they'd been receiving. Chen jokingly remarked that if there was a connection, they would probably receive a paper iPhone soon. The girl's grandfather had died a month ago, and she had started asking for an iPad just a week earlier. Since she was on school vacation and hadn't interacted with any strangers, the man installed a security camera at home. Unfortunately, due to blind spots, the footage didn't reveal anything useful. That night, Chen stayed over to keep watch. Just as he dozed off, the man woke him in a panic. Another paper iPhone had appeared at the door. Judging by its craftsmanship, it seemed handmade, yet the cameras had captured no one. The next day, Chen began following the girl and discovered she had a close friend, a little boy. She often told him how much she loved iPhones, but that her parents wouldn't buy her one. She even said if her grandpa was still alive, he would definitely get one for her. Chen installed more advanced security cameras around the house, ensuring there were no blind spots. That afternoon, the girl's friend came over. Chen deliberately played with an iPad to grab the children's attention. The girl was instantly enamored, but the boy seemed far more focused on the girl herself. She begged her father to buy her an iPad, but he sternly refused, saying she needed to focus on her studies. Seeing the disappointment on the girl's face, the boy silently made a decision. He then began intently examining Chen's iPad. Later that night, something finally happened. The cameras revealed the boy sneaking around, caught in the act. They opened the door and confronted him. At that moment, it seemed clear to everyone that the boy had been responsible for all the paper offerings. Now it seems that the case is closed. Chen left with his payment, but upon returning home, something felt off. He realized that the paper iPhone and iPad were not made by the same person. Just then, a delivery man arrived. He introduced himself as an employee of Chen's friend and noticed the paper iPad Chen was holding. Seeing the words Netherworld Express printed on it, the delivery man froze in shock. He explained that when his boss's father passed away, his boss had commissioned a paper replica of an entire logistics company, complete with delivery trucks. One word in their company's name had even been changed to Netherworld. Alarmed, Chen rushed back inside and reviewed the footage carefully. This time, he spotted something different. As if that weren't enough, the paper iPad suddenly powered on, making a startup sound. Chen grabbed it, and to his horror, the screen lit up with the image of an old man, his friend's late father, grinning back at him. And the story ends here. The fifth story begins with a housekeeping lady knocking on a hotel room door. After receiving no response for a long time, she decided to enter. Inside, she found a man lying on the bed, arms and legs spread wide, his whole body trembling as if he was trying to get up but couldn't move. The lady immediately recognized what was happening: sleep paralysis. This wasn't the first time. Incidents like this had been happening so frequently at the hotel that rumors of hauntings began to spread, seriously damaging its reputation. With no choice left, the hotel manager sought Chen's help. Like Chen, the manager didn't believe in ghosts. He asked Chen to investigate, hoping to uncover a logical explanation. Chen had faced similar cases before, and back then, he always repeated his catchphrase, "Ghosts only exist in people's minds." But this time, Chen couldn't bring himself to say those words. That afternoon, Chen followed the hotel manager to the property and was led to the last room at the end of the corridor, the room where all the strange incidents had occurred. Chen examined the air conditioning and drainage pipes, narrowing his focus for the investigation. While working, he encountered the cleaning lady who gave him some peculiar advice. She warned Chen that since this is the tail room of the hotel, he should knock 3 times first before he opens the cabinets, and he should not open any unused cabinets unnecessarily. As for the shoes, don't line them up neatly. If he does, they might think he is leaving them out for them to wear. The cleaning lady added that the last room on the first floor has something trying to ascend to the afterlife, but this room has something pressing it down, keeping it from leaving. So it keeps rising and falling back and forth in constant pain. She explained that she'd worked at many hotels and that no one could ever explain the strange things happening in tail rooms. She cautioned him to follow the rules here. With that, she left, leaving Chen bewildered and alone to continue his investigation. At this point, Chen was no longer as skeptical as before. He was starting to believe, at least a little. He sat down and sent a text to a friend asking if he was being too scientific and letting it cloud his judgment. The friend replied that science advances by disproving itself through ideal experiments. Questioning is part of the process. Encouraged by this, Chen pressed on. Eventually, Chen reached his conclusion. The drainage pipes were toxic. The hotel's entire plumbing system was horizontally designed, meaning all the gases were being vented through the last room. Guests in this room were inhaling toxic fumes, which caused physical symptoms like sleep paralysis, what people commonly call being pressed by a ghost. The truth was finally revealed. The manager was ecstatic, praising Chen for solving the case. He rushed off to get Chen's payment, thrilled to have concrete evidence that the hotel wasn't haunted. With this proof, the manager could silence the rumors and restore the hotel's reputation. Exhausted after days of work, Chen lay down on the bed to rest and accidentally fell asleep. By the time he woke up, the room was pitch dark and the manager still hadn't returned with the money. Half asleep, Chen suddenly felt water dripping onto his face. As he opened his eyes, he froze in terror. From the ceiling, a woman in a soaking wet white dress descended directly toward him. Before he could react, she pressed down on him with an overwhelming weight. At that moment, Chen recalled the cleaning lady's words. Something is trying to ascend, but it can't. It keeps going up and down, trapped in its pain. The horror was indescribable. Moments later, Chen finally regained control of his body. He leapt up and rushed to the door, just as a hotel staff member arrived with his payment. The staff member apologized, explaining that the check needed the big boss's signature, which had caused the delay. Chen quickly collected the money and urged her to tell the boss that the toxic gas here is serious and they should get it fixed quickly. Before he could leave, the staff member shared a chilling secret about the room. It turns out years ago, a woman in white committed suicide here. Ever since, strange things have been happening. The hotel covered up the incident immediately, and no one who works here is allowed to talk about it. Chen finally understood. He had been a pawn all along. The hotel management didn't care whether the place was truly haunted or not. All they wanted was any evidence that could disprove the rumors and protect their business and reputation. Chen's fame as an investigator made his findings the perfect cover. Back home, Chen sat quietly, his mind in turmoil. For the first time, he began to doubt his beliefs, wondering if he was wrong to be so insistent on science and reason. He wanted to ask his friend if ghosts really existed, but as he started to type the message, he hesitated. After a long inner struggle, he deleted it without asking. This marked a turning point for Chen, a moment when his disbelief began to falter. The 6th story begins with a man who was sleeping soundly late one night when the woman beside him suddenly woke him up, asking for exactly 100,000. Half asleep, the man mumbled that he'd give her cash, but the woman refused. She handed him a bank card number and insisted that the money be transferred to the card. Cash wouldn't do. The bizarre request startled him awake from his wet dream, and then a chilling thought struck him to wonder why there was even a sexy woman here because he had been single for ages. He turned to look beside him, only to freeze in terror. Shocked, he wet himself on the spot. With a jolt, he woke up again from his wet dream, but this time for real. The woman was gone, but in her place was a note with a bank account number written on it. At the same time, investigator Chen was dealing with his own trouble. His ex-girlfriend had turned up demanding rent. She explained that because of his repeated delays, the company decided that if Chen wanted to renew his lease, he'd have to pay 50% of a year's rent up front. Chen was stunned, wondering where he was supposed to get that kind of money. His ex-girlfriend, however, remained unfazed. She told him he should be able to pick up work easily with his reputation, and she was sure people would line up to hire him. Unbeknownst to her, Chen had begun questioning everything lately. He didn't have the energy or desire to prove whether someone's house was haunted anymore. Just then, Chen's phone buzzed with a notification. He stared in shock, noticing that $100,000 had just been deposited into his bank account. At the same time, his inbox showed 8 unread emails. One email stood out with the subject line, asking for Chen's help with $100,000 as the down payment. Chen opened it to find a melodramatic story. The sender, a sexy woman who had graduated from university a year ago, became a secretary to a company's CEO. The CEO, however, wasn't exactly a decent guy. After several encounters, they began a smelly relationship. The woman knew the CEO was married, but she didn't care. She wrote that if she loved his money, she must love all of him. They were together for a year until she discovered she was pregnant. That's when everything changed. The CEO tried to pay her off to get an abortion. When she refused, he locked her in a dark room. Desperate, the woman had stumbled across Chen's name online and was now begging him for help. After reading the story, Chen tried to reply to her email. However, the system said the message failed to send. So, Chen asked a friend to trace the email for him. On the bright side, Chen now had the money to pay his rent. He handed over a full year's rent in cash, leaving his ex-girlfriend stunned. The next day, Chen went straight to the CEO's company. He picked up 2 key pieces of information. The CEO's wife was returning from abroad soon, and the CEO was terrified of his wife because her family was even wealthier and more powerful than his. That evening, Chen received the woman's 9th email saying it's so dark and cold here. She was scared and begged Chen to hurry up and save her. As soon as he finished reading, his friend's email trace results came in. Following the lead, Chen ended up at the house of the man who'd transferred the $100,000. It's the same man from the wet dream. The man was fixing his water pipes when Chen arrived. Seeing Chen, the man looked relieved, saying Chen had come at the right time and he had been dreaming about a ghost who kept asking him to send money. She said if he didn't, she'd haunt him forever. He was so scared he transferred the money just to get her off his back. Hearing this, Chen couldn't help but laugh, saying he was too rich for his own good. But at least the account she gave was his. Putting the pieces together, Chen asked the man if this house belonged to that CEO. The man admitted it, saying that guy sold it to him quite cheap. Chen sighed and told him to call the police now and to stay far away from the guy who sold him this house, and that he shouldn't be afraid of whatever happens next. With that, Chen began searching the house, eventually zeroing in on the bathroom. He focused on the bathtub and smashed the tiles with a hammer. What they discovered inside left them stunned. Hidden beneath the tiles was a body. Following the investigation, the CEO was arrested and jailed on murder charges. Chen received a 10th email from the ghost woman simply expressing her thanks, and with that, the story ended. As time went on, even Chen began to feel that his beliefs in no ghosts no longer held true. Reality had slowly bent a man of pure science into someone who couldn't help but entertain superstition. The 7th story begins in a beauty salon room where a beautician was performing an electric therapy facial for a customer. After setting everything up, she left the room to wash her hands. Moments later, a sharp chicken scream echoed through the salon. Rushing back, she found a colleague passed out on the floor and the customer convulsing uncontrollably. Panicking, the beautician quickly switched off the electric therapy machine and removed the facial mask. However, instead of improving, the customer's eyes widened in terror, staring blankly at something in front of her. The sight sent chills down the beautician's spine to her smelly butt. Trembling, she asked the customer what she had seen. The next day, the salon owner called Chen for help. The staff were convinced the place was haunted, but the female owner didn't buy it. She believed someone was deliberately stirring up trouble. Unable to find evidence herself, and worried that involving the police would hurt business, she turned to Chen. Chen hesitated briefly before asking if she just needed evidence. In earlier episodes, Chen would have shared the owner's skepticism, dismissing the idea of ghosts outright. But now, he truly approached this case as a search for evidence, no more, no less. At the time of the incident, there had been 2 witnesses. One was so terrified that she called in sick. The other, although present, had already handed in her resignation. Chen decided to speak to the remaining woman. When they met, she was holding a photograph showing 4 people: the sick woman, the resigned employee, herself, and another individual, someone who had once been the owner's business partner. The owner clearly disliked seeing the photo, which piqued Chen's curiosity about the former partner. The day before, on his way to the salon, Chen had encountered this same woman handing out flyers. She was advertising a new beauty salon about to open. After asking around, Chen learned that she and the current salon owner had originally opened the business together. However, due to disagreements and a falling out, they split and went their separate ways. This revelation gave Chen a clear direction. As he continued investigating, the truth became evident. Someone was indeed sabotaging the salon. A normal person can tolerate alternating currents under 20 milliamps and direct currents under 50 milliamps. When the current flowing through the body remains below what the cells can handle, the body experiences varying levels of convulsions. In a dry state, the body's resistance is around 2,000 megaohms, but when wet, it can drop to 1,000 megaohms or even lower. During spa treatments, customers' bodies naturally become damp, reducing their resistance. At that point, if a malfunctioning or leaking electric machine is placed nearby, it can cause the customer to convulse. Hearing this reasoning, one staff member asked, if a customer gets electrocuted, wouldn't they react immediately? Chen's answer was more technical but revealed the dark truth. During the spa, a small amount of an anesthetic-like substance had been mixed into the treatment. This temporarily numbed the customer's pain receptors while keeping their consciousness intact. In medical terms, this is called dissociative anesthesia. With the truth exposed, one of the employees cracked under pressure and revealed that the former business partner had orchestrated everything. She admitted to carrying out the partner's instructions, but insisted that any further consequences were the owner's problem to deal with. After finding the evidence for the salon owner, Chen finished his work and was ready to collect his payment. The owner, however, generously handed him an extra beauty voucher. Seeing the voucher, Chen politely said that he was quite interested in trying it out. To his surprise, the owner immediately replied, "If that's the case, there's no time like the present. He should do it today." Chen hesitated for a moment, but eventually stepped into the treatment room. He mentioned he was in a hurry, so the owner decided to keep it simple and applied an eye mask and a facial mask. However, after the owner briefly stepped out, Chen suddenly experienced the same strange phenomenon as the previous customer. It felt like a classic case of sleep paralysis. His entire body trembled, he wanted to get up but couldn't move, and in a haze, he saw a blurry, ghostly figure standing right in front of him. At that moment, the owner returned, and Chen instantly regained his mobility. Without wasting a second, he jumped up, grabbed his money, and rushed out, claiming he was short on time. The owner was left stunned by the look on his face. When Chen got home, he received a call from the employee who had quit. She revealed that there had been a fire at the salon's previous location, which tragically claimed several lives. Back then, the former business partner quickly moved the salon to its current site after learning about the fire. The current owner, however, refused to believe in any superstitions, which led to their falling out and eventual split. What started as a simple search for evidence had unexpectedly turned into a ghost story. Chen began doubting his life choices and even considered leaving this line of work. Just then, his ex-girlfriend appeared to comfort him using words only but not muscles. She said he finally seemed like he was really starting to find himself. Her words gave Chen the courage and strength to keep going, and so he took on another job. The 8th story begins with a couple who was woken up by the sound of children laughing and playing at midnight. The wife urged her husband to check, but he was too scared and kept making excuses. Eventually, with no other choice, the wife accompanied him. What they saw left them in horror. Their daughter was facing the wall, clapping her hands. The next day, they sought out Chen and showed him a video of the incident. After watching it, Chen asked them if this was a new house or an old one, and if their daughter ever acted like this before. The couple's faces turned pale, and their eyes darted nervously. They clearly knew something, but chose not to say. The wife quickly dismissed Chen's questions, insisting that none of that matters. They told him to just prove to them that their daughter wasn't haunted. That's all they needed. Chen sighed and told them that hiring him didn't come cheap. The wife replied confidently that money wasn't an issue. With that, Chen followed the couple back to their home. Upon arrival, the little girl reacted strongly, making it clear she did not welcome Chen's presence. Chen ignored it and decided to stay the night. The family stayed up with him, sitting silently on the sofa, waiting. At around midnight, the girl suddenly got up as though sleepwalking and made her way to the sofa. But this time, she wasn't playing. She simply rested her head against the iron railing as though listening to something. Chen mimicked her actions and pressed his head to the railing. Moments later, he followed the railing downward and discovered a cracked tile with an exposed iron pipe beneath it. The next morning, Chen knocked on the door of the neighboring apartment. A young couple lived there, and when Chen asked the husband if he'd heard any strange sounds at night, the man grew irritated and rudely told him to leave. During the day, Chen ran a series of tests, using wires and instruments to examine the pipes from multiple angles. In the end, he concluded that the strange occurrences were caused by the iron pipe. He reasoned that the water pipes build up pressure at night, causing the rapid flow of air to collide within the pipes and create faint, eerie noises. These sounds have a frequency that only sensitive ears, like those of a child in a light sleep, can pick up. Chen concluded that the incident wasn't supernatural at all. It was simply the pipes creating strange noises that disturbed the child. With the evidence secured, Chen was ready to leave. Before he left, he gently reminded the little girl to sleep well from now on. Unexpectedly, the girl told him not to come back again, or her sister wouldn't play with her anymore. Hearing this, Chen immediately asked who her sister was, where she was, and what she looked like. The little girl replied innocently that her sister was right behind him. She looked just like this. Feeling a chill run down his spine to his butt, Chen didn't wait around. He shot up and left in a hurry for his shitty life. When he reached the building's security guard, he learned that a wife next door had hanged herself last month. After her death, it seemed she hadn't moved on, but instead had stayed behind to play with the little girl next door. Whether it was a ghost or not, Chen was now convinced this house was truly haunted. Back home, Chen sank into a deep gloom. He called his ex-girlfriend over, telling her he wanted to move out and quit everything. He even messaged an online friend saying he wanted to meet in person. The reply was cryptic, saying the time wasn't right yet. And with that, this story came to an end. The 9th story begins with Chen still couldn't turn down a job since the money was good. This time, the client was a man. During his wife's pregnancy, the man cheated on her. The emotional trauma caused his wife to miscarry. Afterward, the woman became erratic and unstable, often pretending to hold and soothe an invisible baby. Racked with guilt, the man tried to make amends. He spent a fortune importing an expensive doll from Japan, hoping it might comfort his wife. However, things only got worse. Instead of improving, her condition deteriorated further. The man grew increasingly paranoid, fearing that the unborn child had come back for revenge. His mental health spiraled to the point where he relied on medication to cope with even the slightest scare. Without it, he feared he might collapse on the spot. After listening to the man's story, Chen couldn't hide his disdain. Still, he'd taken the man's money, so he had to do his job. When Chen entered the couple's bedroom, he saw what the man had described. The wife was cradling the Barbie doll as if it were a real baby. Upon seeing Chen, she became extremely agitated. With no other choice, Chen left for the time being. The next day, when Chen returned, he found the man eating alone. The man mentioned that his wife had been a renowned chef before her breakdown. Back then, she loved cooking elaborate meals. Surprisingly, even after her condition worsened, the variety and presentation of her dishes only improved. Every day, she prepared a feast fit for royalty, enough to fill a table with all kinds of delicacies. However, there was something strange. The wife never touched any of the food. She would only eat plain rice. The man shared this casually, but it caught Chen's attention. Afterward, Chen began inspecting the fridge, the kitchen, and even the food scraps. Without saying a word, he secretly swapped out the sugar cubes the man used in his coffee. Chen had noticed the man's habit of adding sugar to his coffee every time. When he took the sugar back for testing, the results shocked him. The sugar was actually LSD, a powerful synthetic hallucinogen. On top of that, the meals the man was eating were problematic. Individually, each dish was harmless, but when combined and consumed regularly, they became toxic. It was a classic case of food incompatibility, producing a poison as deadly as arsenic. When Chen revealed the truth, the man was dumbfounded. His wife admitted that she was trying to take revenge for the child they'd lost. Despite everything, the man didn't call the police. He believed he owed too much to his wife and their broken family to take further action. After everything was over, the man asked Chen to take the doll with him, saying he never wanted to see it again. Chen didn't think much of it and brought the doll home. However, as he sat counting his money, Chen began to feel as though the doll was peeping at him. At first, he brushed it off, thinking he was simply exhausted. But when he started looking up information about the doll, he realized things weren't as simple as they seemed. The doll was allegedly the most expensive in the world, created in 1835 by a Japanese craftsman. There were 12 dolls in total, numbered 1 to 12. The first 11 were perfectly normal, but doll number 12 was different. According to legend, it came from hell itself and was the embodiment of a vengeful spirit. After the craftsman completed doll number 12, he died under mysterious circumstances, and the doll vanished without a trace. Remembering the 12 engraved on the bottom of its foot, Chen was hit with a wave of dread. But when he turned back to look for it, the doll was gone. Moments later, it reappeared, and this time it lunged at him. In a panic, Chen threw alcohol at the doll and set it ablaze. The room filled with a blood-curdling scream, and then it was over. The doll was destroyed, and the story ended there. The 10th story begins with a man who worked as a mortuary makeup artist, responsible for preparing bodies for funerals. Often, grieving families would give him a little extra money, asking him to ensure their loved ones looked their best. However, on this particular day, a family only gave him $200, leaving the makeup artist seething with anger. While smoking a cigarette and venting to a friend over the phone, he carelessly burned the hand of the deceased with the cigarette ash. Hanging up the call, the makeup artist decided to rush through the makeup and call it a day. But just as he was about to finish, the body suddenly sat up. Before the makeup artist could react, he collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. Moments later, he was dead. The makeup artist had been hired by the young heir of the funeral home, a move meant to undermine the head mortician and his disobedient apprentices. Now, with the makeup artist dead after just a few days on the job, the young heir couldn't help but suspect the head mortician's involvement. To get to the bottom of things, he called in Chen to investigate. When Chen was introduced to the head mortician scoffed, saying the makeup artist disrespected the dead. He deserved what he got. There's nothing more to say. At that moment, one of the head mortician's apprentices recognized Chen as the famed paranormal investigator and a staunch skeptic of the supernatural. The apprentice whispered this to the head mortician, who, intrigued, agreed to let Chen examine the body. In the morgue, Chen took one look at the burn marks on the deceased's hand and understood what had happened. The next day, he returned with his equipment and brought the head mortician along for a demonstration. Chen explained the makeup artist accidentally burned the deceased's arm with his cigarette, which triggered a reflex in the nerves, causing the body to sit up. The makeup artist was scared to death, literally. It wasn't some nonsense about disrespecting the dead. As the head mortician begrudgingly accepted the explanation, the young heir couldn't hide his glee. He scolded the head mortician, warning him not to spread superstitious nonsense again, and then eagerly ran off to fetch Chen's payment. With just the two of them left in the morgue, the head mortician turned to Chen and said his experiment was already disrespectful to the dead. He then told Chen to place his hand on the chest of the deceased. If nothing happened, he would believe him. Chen hesitated, clearly torn, but eventually he reached out and touched the body. In that very moment, the corpse suddenly sprang upright. Chen stumbled backward in shock, pressing himself against the wall, but it didn't stop there. His hands began to move involuntarily, clutching tightly around his own neck. In the instant Chen felt death closing in, his mind raced through many thoughts, including the ghostly encounters from the first 9 cases. At that moment, he finally understood the head mortician's words. With what little strength he had left, he cried out for help. Upon seeing that Chen had been punished as he deserved, the head mortician didn't want him to die. Without hesitation, he recited a chant to soothe the spirit. As the deceased collapsed back into place, Chen was finally freed. When Chen returned home, he was completely depressed. He sat in his chair for a long time, staring out at the evening sky. After much contemplation, a realization struck him. Though he had always believed in science, he now understood that the world was far too vast for everything to be explained by science alone. And with this newfound understanding, Chen realized that the version of himself who had once refused to believe in anything was far scarier than those who blindly followed superstitions. With this clarity, Chen finished writing his notes and sent a message to his friend, asking to meet. His friend didn't refuse. Instead, he asked if he really believed now. Then, he sent Chen a photo. When Chen looked at it, he froze to see the photo of himself. His instincts kicked in and he began scanning for cameras, asking his friend if he had been watching him all along. The reply came quickly, saying he had always been by his side. Chen closely examined the photo but found nothing unusual. However, just as he was about to put the phone down, something made him turn around abruptly. And with that, the story came to a close. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.